Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. So first, would you be able to tell us your name and your official title as it connects to Metz Elementary School?
My name is Azucena Garcia, and this year my title is principal at Metz Elementary.
Thank
I
you.
am principal overseeing both campuses.
Okay, and what roles have you served in the Metz community in general, and how long did you serve in each role?
Okay, let me give you a little bit of background. I have been principal. This is my 18th year of principalship. So 17 of those years were at Sanchez Elementary. I also served Sanchez for 3 years as an assistant principal, and I believe it was 7 years as a teacher. So really my entire experience has been, well, not entire, there's other schools before that, but this is my first experience in serving the Metz community last year and this year. But last year was different because last year, you do know the background, right, of the school changes and everything that happened. So yes. Our district decided to, I guess, close Metz Elementary, and Sanchez was to be modernized. Well, I should have said that first. So the district voted on having the Sanchez building modernized. And while they were in order to do that, they moved all of the Sanchez community over to the Metz campus because both schools were very low, under-enrolled, if you will. So the first year, which was last year, of both schools being at the Metz campus, there were 2 principals, and we ran as 2 separate schools. Everything was separate. Meetings, community meetings, faculty meetings, everything was done separately. And TEA recognizes it as 2 separate campuses. Okay, so this year, Ms. Castillo, the principal at Metz, secured a different position over the summer. So over the summer, kind of late in the summer, I was told that I would serve as principal to both Metz and Sanchez, and we could run it as one school for AISD purposes, for district purposes, because it's kind of, but everything still under TEA is run as 2 campuses. So it's kind of interesting. I guess the personnel part and the community part, which I think is very important, we try to bring them both together as one community, right? I am principal serving both campuses. I am your principal. And we decided, we had a meeting and decided to go with Metz Sanchez with a hyphen, right? To be inclusive of both communities. But many of the systems in place still consider us 2 separate campuses. For example, TEA still considers us Metz Elementary and Sanchez Elementary, and there's separate data. Our bookkeeping is still separate, different accounts. So it's a very unique situation. So to answer your question, the only other time that I have been at Metz was maybe it was in 1985, something like that, 84, 85, whenever we had the tragedy of the Challenger. I remember that. That's when I was doing my student teaching at Metz. That's my only other, that's the only other time that I served this community as a student teacher, way back in the 80s, for a semester or however long that took.
So during or after that year, you went to Sanchez and served there as a teacher and an assistant principal, and then principal, and now you're at Metz. Is that how the chronology worked?
Well, there's a, because I was at UT when I was a student, right? And then my first job was not at Sanchez, it was at another school. So I served at the other school first, and then I transferred to Sanchez, spent a deal of time there, and now I'm here at Metz Sanchez.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. May I ask what kind of teacher you were, or what did you teach?
I taught always as a bilingual teacher. I've taught kinder, pre-K, first, fourth. I think that covers the grade levels. Yes, those are the grade level. Always in elementary and always as a bilingual educator.
Okay. So Sanchez had bilingual education as well.
Yes.
Okay. And so you've only really been with the Metz community for the last year and a half, maybe?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the other questions we had for you was just like, we kind of get the gist of the school's atmosphere from the teachers, but from the short time that you've spent there, how would you describe the Metz Elementary community and atmosphere?
Teachers, students, both in general. I don't know. Which community are you referring to? The entire community or just the students, just the teachers?
You can talk about all
just
of
in
them.
general, like, yeah.
Okay. Well, last year we had a very positive welcome when we came over. It was very positive. The faculty, administration, the faculty at Metz welcomed the Sanchez community. It was all really positive. I was highly impressed and touched because it was very nice, of them to welcome us under the conditions that we came under, right? Because it was a school, a board decision, meaning one school would get modernized and one school would be closed. So that was very awkward to be in that position. But we have to, I think a lot of the faculty, if not all of the faculty members will agree that we received a very warm welcome. That was really nice, a very nice way to start the school year. Then we started, right? But we would pretty much do our own things, our own faculty meetings, our own administrative leadership teams. So it was like having a roommate, right? Except in big numbers. We soon saw that our kids, our students, there was a conflict there, right? We needed to address our student population because the students started, my school's better than yours, the regular, the regular things that kids bring up, rivalry, I guess. Not really big, but there was that to be addressed, and we did. As a faculty, or as two separate faculties, last year I had very little opportunity to engage or get to know the Metz faculty because everything was run. We did a few community events together, like for example, the winter holiday dinner that was a tradition that we had at Sanchez, and we decided to do that somewhere around the middle of the fall last year. We met as the two administrative teams and said, why don't we try to merge as many of our community events together? We thought that would be a good idea. So we did have, and also our school-wide, our recognition, student recognition assemblies, all of that. We borrowed, if you will, and some of them were maintained as separate events. For example, the Valentine's dance. Sanchez had one way of doing it on one date, and Metz had another way of doing it. So there were two Valentine's dances, and all kids were invited. So that was a neat thing. Other events we did together and planned together, like I mentioned, the PTA winter holiday dinner. We had separate honor roll assemblies, if you will, but borrowed some of our practices, right? So that's how that plan went, because that's how that went. It wasn't planned out ahead of time because we were not really given. It all happened in succession. We didn't have time to plan for it, so we planned as we went. Then I forgot what the question was. Oh, my impression of the community, right? So yeah, I'm starting. So it was very welcoming. I see a big difference in the communities. Now this year is when I've really gotten to know the community a lot better now, because I'm interacting a lot more with the students, with the teachers, with the parents. And I see that on paper, both communities look very, very similar because, the ethnic breakdown is very similar. Both are high, they have high percentages of Hispanic students, high percentages of low high need, low SES students, right? Socioeconomic status students. But when you really dig down and look at who the students are behind the numbers, it couldn't be any more different. I am very familiar with the Sanchez population, the Hispanic population at Sanchez, many of which are recent immigrants, many of which are here, don't know any English, don't know any of the customs. And this year, I've had the pleasure of getting to know some of the Metz families. It's been a challenge because it's a pandemic year, right? But I know that it's a very different population, and that these are the Hispanics here at Metz seem to be not seem to be are generational family Hispanics. They are not even first and second generation. They're many generations, right? And they've lived here in the community a long time. So there's many of them don't speak Spanish anymore. There's a different attitude about bilingualism between both communities. So those are some of the things that I have seen.
I have a quick question. So what do you mean by like attitude towards bilingualism? Did they like perceive it a different way, the two different communities?
Yes, they do. I am the daughter of immigrant parents, right? So I didn't grow up. I grew up in Chicago, no bilingual ed. So I think that helped shape my attitudes towards bilingual education and bilingualism, because in our family, our parents insisted that we speak nothing but Spanish at home. Yet they wanted us to excel and do well in the all English school. And we did, I think, because of the drive that we got from our parents, right? There was a high value for education and for learning English, but also for maintaining Spanish at home. Now, I see similarities in a lot of the immigrant families that come to us because my parents were like that. So when I talk to parents of immigrant families, they come here for a reason. There's a dream, right? I want my children to be successful. I want them to learn English, that sort of thing. So they value English a whole lot, but then at the same time, they also value Spanish because that's the only language they know. So the children don't hold on to their Spanish, right? They're not going to be able to communicate with themselves, with the parents. Anyways, that seems to be lessened through the generations a lot of times. I'm not going to generalize, but that seems to be the case with a lot of the children that we serve here in this community. I don't want to speak too much in general terms. I just don't see the desire to be bilingual from a lot of the Hispanic families in the Metz community. Why do I say that? I'm going out on a limb here because I don't know the families very well, but we've had meetings. We offered meetings at the beginning of the year to see how many families from Metz would be Hispanic families that spoke, that indicated that there was another language at home, right? English and Spanish. There's a home language survey. How many of them would be interested in enrolling in the two-way dual language programs? And we didn't get very many. We got maybe two or three. So that's where my commentaries stem from. But it's been a very challenging year. It's been very challenging to get parents involved in the, I think, so bottom line, I value bilingualism a whole lot. And that's one of my biggest charges as an educator. To what we had going at Sanchez is we had initiated a wall-to-wall two-way dual language program. Wall-to-wall, what that means, it may be like district specific. That's the lingo that we use here in AISD. Wall-to-wall means that the entire school would only offer that program. So if you were a parent of a child that didn't want your child to learn English and Spanish simultaneously, then there's no room at that school for your child. You would have to look for another school as for transfer. So here at Metz, they didn't have two-way dual language programming. It was one-way dual language. It was primarily for those recent immigrant families whose children didn't know any English. There's different purposes, right, for both. So bringing the two schools together has been a challenge. I've had to put my goal aside because that was my personal goal as a personal professional, if there's such a thing, right? I always wanted to lead the school to be a wall-to-wall, two-way dual language program. But in working with this community, something has become very evident. It's about, I'm a public servant. I'm about serving this community. So I don't think it is correct to have a neighborhood school, because I'm also a big supporter of small neighborhood schools at the elementary level. So I believe that every child in the neighborhood should be able to attend, to walk to their neighborhood school, right? And should have programming available based on their desires, right? Because it's not up to me to figure out what every child needs. It's up to their parents. So we put the wall-to-wall portion of the two-way dual language aside, and we are now offering both programs. Actually, 3 programs. We're continuing because we had already. When you start a new program, two-way dual language, you start at the bottom. Our first year, we started it at pre-K and kinder, and then the next year it followed to include first graders and then second graders. So some of our classes, at some of our grade levels, we offer two-way dual language. At some of them, we only offer one-way dual language, because that's what Metz had. And then at all grade levels, we offer just English, just general ed instruction for those kids that don't want, that are not ELs or English language learners and do not want to be part of dual language. So we actually have 3 programs going on here.
That's all really interesting, and how like 2 campuses that are, as you said, very similar on paper can appear very different when you actually interact with the communities.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting.
And I've been, I mean, there's a lot of pitfalls, I guess, that people will be quick to point out. That's been my experience of the pitfalls of being in one place for too long. And so I listen when people point them out, right? But there are also a lot of advantages. One advantage that I have seen firsthand is how gentrification in Austin has affected this. You have 2 starkly different communities when you dig down to look at the Hispanics, because of the way East Austin has gentrified the experience here. So Sanchez is a lot closer to I-35, and Metz is a little more tucked away into East Austin. So the generational families here, so gentrification didn't reach Metz, if you will, as quickly as it did Sanchez. All right. So mm-hmm. that what started happening in the Sanchez neighborhood is the houses, right? The property values start going up. People start moving because they can't afford them anymore. But then also the rezoning efforts that the district made when gentrification started happening, because when you have gentrification, you start seeing enrollment trends either increase or decrease. And what we saw in East Austin is the enrollment trends decreased. It hit Sanchez first. So in order to compensate for that, the district started rezoning the boundaries for each school. So Sanchez, whereas Sanchez and Metz and all the East Side schools used to be just neighborhood schools serving only the children in the neighborhood, after the enrollment started dropping, the district reacted by including some areas south of the river. Are either of you from Austin?
No.
No, we just go to school in like central Austin, so we don't know much about East.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I'm trying to explain here. That's why I asked him. So there's the Lady Bird Johnson Lake. They call it a lake. That's one of my pet peeves. It's not a lake, it's a river. Anyway.
I'm always really confused by that too.
Yeah, I don't. That's an Austin thing. It's because there's a dam further down, but it's not a big dam. So that's why they get away with calling it a lake. But it's a river. It's the Colorado River. So south of the river, and again, that's another thing. I came to college here and I stayed here. So when I was as an undergrad at UT, all of those apartments, it was like Apartment City on Riverside, the Riverside area, that was mostly all student housing. Mm-hmm. But as they became older and older, they were old when I lived there to begin with. Now imagine how old they are. So they became more and more affordable, if you will. So there is a huge pocket of recent immigrants that reside there. And there's several of these throughout the city. So they were, I guess, overly populated because those apartments were no longer dwellings for single students, right? They were for families with children. So the district recaptured, redrew the boundary lines for the schools in order to keep our schools full populated. So they started with Sanchez, and we took a lot of those complexes where a lot of children were living, and they started coming to Sanchez. A lot of them happened to be recent immigrants. Then they did another rezoning, which included Metz and Brook, which is now closed. But that's a little bit of history of how that happened. When you're asking, how can the two Hispanic communities be so different or population? That's why it was because of everything that was done with gentrification and in response to gentrification.
Yeah, I was actually one of the students that visited the campus, I think 2 weeks ago, and we drove a little bit around the area of the school. And the gentrification, I knew it was bad, but it was very obvious. I was unpleasantly surprised by how obvious the gentrification was. It was, yeah, it surprised me.
Yeah, we did a community walk last Thursday for one of our faculty meetings. It was all organized, so we just showed up, socially distanced at the cafeteria gym. It's a big spot. And I gave everyone their assignments. Everyone got in groups of 4 or 5 people, and everyone had a zone, just a walking distance here around Metz. We had done that at Sanchez before, to gather data because we want to see how many children actually live here in the neighborhood, but don't send their students here. And there are children here. They're just sending their children other places. There are, just to give you some data points, the neighborhood area that is zoned to Metz, of that entire area, there's quite a lot of blocks, right? Only 8 students from the Metz neighborhood attend Metz. That's it, 8.
Wow.
And then when we looked at the Sanchez, because I gathered data for both, only 6 students from the Sanchez neighborhood attend Sanchez. The rest are children that now live in Riverside, and that number is dwindling too, because now they're revamping and all of those apartment complexes. See, so our families live in the older complexes that are there. That's not going to last for very long. So we are really in trouble, the East Side schools, right now. We are. Our charge now was to find out how many kids are in the neighborhood. We have a good number. I have the data there. I haven't, calculated it all. I haven't analyzed it. But we need, it's marketing now. We have to market our schools to it's a new population, gentrified population in the neighborhoods.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just had a quick question because part of my exhibit is addressing like segregation. And I thought it was just going to be a historical type thing, but I found many articles about how like AIC's like closing of schools has like perpetuated segregation in Austin. And so do you think the rezoning and like the redistricting kind of contributed to that, or what do you do you have any opinion on that?
The schools here have been historically segregated just because of the way the city is set up. I mean, there's no other way around it. People think of Austin as a very liberal town, and but if you live here long enough, you'll see that there's the big segregation line is I-35. Yeah, that's changing now because of gentrification, but it's only working from west to east. It's not working the flow is coming from gentrification the flow is coming from west to east. It's not going from East Austin to west. It's not going that way. That's very interesting too. So what was your question exactly? Do you feel that the schools are segregated? Was that what you asked?
Yeah, just that's pretty much the gist, because I think one of my questions for you was just like if you were, a lot of people are upset about the closing of Metz because they feel like it's disproportionately impacting like schools that are mostly like catering to students of color. And so like they think that it's contributing to the issue of like segregation in Austin and within the school. So it's like, if you were AISD, how would you handle the situation, or what do you think could be like could have been done to integrate kids more?
I agree. I totally agree that this school should not be closed. It's a beautiful campus. I mean, it's not old. And like I said, I'm a strong proponent of schools at the elementary level. I think as a parent also, I would want my child to attend an elementary school, or my grandkids, right? Where the principal knows every kid's name. You need to have that personal touch. So I think the district's charge should be to find ways to keep these neighborhood schools open. It's marketing. It's all about marketing. There are kids here. There are kids.
Okay.
The district has to, make each campus a different, like academy with a different focus. Oh, I want my child in the theater arts academy or in the STEM academy. If you do that, I think, and really invest in that and market it that way.
So do you think it's a funding issue? Because AISD says it closed Metz and those 3 other schools due to under enrollment. And so do you think, like, if we had a bigger budget to market ourselves and to really revamp the school, we could have stayed open?
Yes and no. I think the district has the money. I think it's the way it's being allocated. They're not looking at, their rationale is it's costing too much to keep all these small schools operating when they're so under enrolled. I agree with that. That makes sense, right? It's all about efficiency. It's not efficient to run the schools right now the way they're being run. So that's got to change. And how do you change that? Again, you change up the schools, what the school operates. Sanchez could be over there as a wall-to-wall campus. Metz is right here, just a few blocks away, that offers a different type of programming. If we think outside the box. And so in the first scenario where the schools are under enrolled and it's not efficient, yes, I think it's about budgeting. In the second scenario, no, it's not about budgeting. You just rethink the whole thing. We have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I completely agree. I think it's a very good possible solution, but I don't think AISD may have thought that far ahead.
We have a lot of changes
Mhm.
in central administration, so I don't know. I'm quite honestly that anyone's here long enough to really think it through.
So my next question is continuing with this idea of the bureaucracy of AISD. So as the principal, you're really like the connection between the Metz community and also the Sanchez community and the bureaucratic AISD power. So, and this is actually something that Lupe Ramos, who's a former teacher at Metz, brought up to me. And we are curious as to whether you have any insight or opinion on the social emotional impact that the school's closure is having on the students, especially because it's happening in the middle of a pandemic. So how have you seen that it has impacted the emotional status of the students?
I think that has yet to be seen by me, and I don't know what I'm going to see. I'm speaking a literal term. One of the restraints, if you will, of the pandemic is that we don't get to see our community. I can't. You learn a lot about the kids when you start meeting their parents and talking to the parents, and that's been hindered through the pandemic. So I haven't gotten to know the Metz community as much as I would like to, but I imagine there is a great deal, just judging by the faculty at Metz that I'm working with now and getting to know a lot more closely, there's a lot of grieving that needs to happen because this is a very traumatic thing for a neighborhood school. A lot of teachers have been here a long time too, to be happening. And I haven't been able to gauge the social emotional level, if you will, of the community. I haven't. So that's why I can't really, I know there's bound to be a lot of needs that aren't being addressed. We're doing the best that we can here. yeah, with the kids, because of the kids that are here, because we don't have them all.
Yeah.
You're very limited as to what you can do when the kids are on remotely.
Mhm.
But there's a lot that's being left unaddressed, and there's only so much. For example, we have a community meeting next week, um, and it's supposed to be huge. And if this were an in-person thing, it would be huge. I don't know how many people are going to log on to a Zoom meeting to learn about the new modernized campus, because this is the communications department now trying to get the community excited about the move, right? So, okay, you might get a good response from the Sanchez community because, they've known all along it's going to be a new building. I don't know. I'm very curious to see how many of our Metz community members are going to log on,
Mhm.
because this is still a very sore thing that has not been addressed. It's not been addressed, and well, I'm trying to figure out ways of doing it, because we had plans of we being Ms. Castillo, the former principal here, and I, at the beginning of last year before the pandemic, right, of how to bring closure for the Metz community. We're going to have an assembly, honor, everything that was done here, invite alumni from Metz, and do some story sharing. And there's a capsule, a time capsule somewhere in the building that we were going to open, and it was going to be really cool. Well, that didn't happen, and it's not likely to happen again. I don't want to do that virtually.
Mhm.
So I've been having conversations. There's already a committee planning the inauguration of the Sanchez building, but that's about a building, and we're not really celebrating a building. We're celebrating two communities coming together. So I want to incorporate the time capsule into this inauguration and say, welcome, welcome both communities. This is a time capsule for Metz. Let's open it. And then at that time, create another time capsule for, we've got to do something. I don't see anything being done from at the district level. It's really, really hard to find ways to do
Mhm.
that during a pandemic, when
Yeah.
everything has to be done virtually.
Right. Right. And I think that's also what we've seen as students, even in college. It doesn't get any easier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So continuing on this topic about the pandemic that we've been focusing on a bit, that is my main interest, especially because, as you've noted, the situation of Metz is very unique and very unfortunately unique, that it's closing during a pandemic. So there isn't that opportunity for closure. But going back to March of 2020, actually, were you still the principal at Sanchez during that time?
Last year?
Yes,
Yes.
in March 2020.
Yes.
Okay. So did you gain any insight from Ms. Castillo, for example, or even from your own experience with the Sanchez community, of what the initial shock was to the students and to the teachers and the administration, to everything shutting down, and how the school campuses adapted to that initial shock?
How we adapted. Okay, let me tell you, let me go back to that date. We were shut down on the Friday before spring break. That was huge for us, both Metz and Sanchez, because this was yet another one of the events that we had we had an event schedule. It was going to be our track and field day. And we put a lot of time and energy and planning into making this, again, another, both Metz and Sanchez combined event, right? And track and field is one of the funnest times of the year for the kids, right? And the parents, because everyone comes out. So that was scheduled for that Friday. And that Thursday, we received notice that the school was shut down, right? At that time, I don't think anyone had any idea that this would go a year out. We would still be in the pandemic.
Mhm.
But that's how it happened. So it was really, really a big letdown for our kids. And that was a week right before spring break, right? So here we are at the last minute. Oh, what do we do? You know, we'll send the kids home, right? Sent the kids home. And then I thought it was just for that one day, Friday. And so we made quick on the spot decisions. What do we do with all these concessions and foods, right? Luckily, they're sealed, Fritos and potato chips. Well, we'll have our track and field day when we come back. Let's just put them aside, right? So then that Friday is canceled. Our track and field is canceled during spring break. I'm thinking as administrator, okay, great. Now I have to find another date here before the end of the year to have this track and field event, right? We can do that. So everybody goes off on spring break. And then we're waiting, right? Because during spring break, we hear that school is going to continue to be shut down. Mm-hmm. And then continues and continues. And we were having that conversation the other day. I don't know how we were left to our own devices, as to our teachers were left to their own devices as to how to continue to teach, because nobody had any device, nothing, nada. Eventually, sometime before the end of the year, our third graders got Chromebook, because they started at the high school level first to ensure that all the high school kids at the district had a device, and then all the middle school kids. Somewhere around the end of April or May is when they ensured that our third through fifth graders would get a device. So then they went into and our pre-K through second didn't have anything. So what were our teachers doing to teach? Well, the district, a few weeks after spring break, figured it out. School, we gotta keep teaching. How are we gonna do this? They started creating packet masks, and they were in mass, right? And there were all these sites where people could go pick up instructional packets by grade level, by language and grade level. That's it. And then those teachers that were lucky enough and comfortable enough, lucky enough to have established a class dojo, that type of communication system, kept communicating that way. But that was worse than anything I can ever imagine. That part from March, April, and May, those 3 months of last year, because there was no guidance as to how we were supposed to meet the instructional academic needs of the kids. Can you hold on? Give me a second.
Yes, of course.
Come in.
I feel like I've gotten good context.
Yeah, I just have a few more questions. I don't know if you have any more questions. There's a few that haven't been asked yet, but.
Okay, I'm sorry. Someone came into my office.
That's okay.
The answer. Okay.
So it sounds like this is another example of because we've heard a lot about the teachers putting in their own time, their own effort to create these huge events for the students and to, bring their own snacks, for example, the field day and the fun day that we heard about. And so this seems like another example of the teachers once again stepping up to provide for their students when the district provides no guidance or no supplemental instruction.
Well, let me clarify. I'm sorry, I'm eating my salad too. So all those snacks and everything that we had, the school purchases them. We had them.
Oh, okay.
So it was on teacher stuff. I don't want to, downplay any of that. But no, we don't expect the teachers to do that. We had boxes and boxes of stuff, right?
Okay.
Nachos, the cheese for nacho, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. We kept thinking that sooner or later, they're going to open up the schools again, right? And we'll have our track and field. Even if we don't have our track and field, we'll have snacks for the kids. Well, that never happened. So then when it came closer to the summer, we started getting our end of the year checklist. You have to clean the building, because it's shut down for the summer. We had to figure out what we were going to do with those snacks because we don't have any kids. That was fun. Because those are bought, that didn't happen district wide. I imagine all sorts of things happen, but with us, that's what happened. I didn't want that stuff to go to waste, and you had to be fair about how you were gonna, it's for the kids. It was purchased with money from the school. It's for the kids. So we had an event where we send out a robocall, and our parent support specialists, some teacher volunteers, we're gonna be at this parking lot. If you want snacks for your kids, come do a drive-by. That's what we did. I mean, things that were unheard of,
Mm-hmm.
And I had to tell parents, if you're going to come, it was a pandemic, right? You have to have a mask on. Don't get out of your car. Just pop your trunk open, and we had already bagged the snacks. And I mean, that was very successful because now you had high panic among the whole community. That was a year ago. I don't know if you remember that. Everyone was really
very vividly. I remember it exactly.
People didn't want to go out. Everyone, don't open your eyes, wear goggles, wear face shields, wear all of this. But we had teachers come out and we did a little drive-by off of the school grounds just so that we wouldn't have all this stuff going to waste here. And yeah, this is stuff that, wow, it's unheard of, unprecedented. But it's for the record.
So what about this past year? I know when I visited the school, I saw a lot of physical barriers and the keep your distance stickers on the ground. But there are some students on campus, right, going to school?
We have a little more than 70% of our kids.
Okay. So in terms of the overall school environment, how do you see that it has changed in response to the pandemic, and how do you see that it has not changed?
Totally different. There are some positives. The kids are so happy. Oh my gosh, they are so happy. Especially earlier in the year. The kids that came to us earlier in the year in the fall, they were very happy. Imagine, most of our kids live in apartments on the Riverside area, during a pandemic, not allowed to go out, not allowed to socialize. Did we have problems back then with kids refusing to wear their masks? No. These little 4-year-olds wearing masks. Wow. I mean, did we have any discipline problems? No, we didn't. Kids were just starving so much for social interaction. They were going to follow any rules you gave them. That was sad. I mean, if you think about it, but really, that was nice. That was great. And from our point of view, sometimes, when during a regular school year, parents come all the time. They come to eat lunch with their kids. They're always looking. They're quick to point out mistakes. So parents are something to contend with. They're not always the most positive, right? So that's one thing that we've talked about in-house here. Wow, it's great. No one here to point the finger at us or to bring any, it's been really nice because that's just one of the policies, right? So there are a lot of things that changed that are different, right? It's just, to me, and this is my opinion, to stand there watching kindergartners walk socially distanced in a line with masks on, not a peep out of them about having to wear a mask, is so unnatural to me. But then I put myself in their shoes. They don't know any different. That's what school is for them. And it's either that or stay home cooped up in an apartment without able to socialize with anyone outside of your family. So they're having their positive experience. It's a new normal is what I'm trying to get at. I hope it doesn't last too long, but yeah, no discipline. I mean, now these last few weeks is when we started to get a little bit of, the feistiness of the kids coming out, but it's been almost a whole year without any discipline concerns. Okay, that's kids misbehaving. Let me clarify that, because there's both. I mean, things have been at the extremes, if you will, right? Such happy kids, no discipline problems. But now get a hold of this. we've had so many CPS calls. Kids
Really?
starving and being deprived of social interaction. We don't know, we don't have that connection as to what's going on at home. We have kids showing up with all sorts of stuff going on. So see, there's extremes on both ends. This pandemic is a stuff to write about. There's so much going on now, and we're out of tune with that for the most part. It's really, really hard to gauge how your kids are doing if all you can see is their little eyes, right?
Mhm.
Uh, anyways, oh my gosh, we've had a lot of CPS calls. That is very, very sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so you also mentioned before that there were plans like for the combining of the two schools that you were working with Ms. Castillo, and that there was also plans for doing like a closure celebration. What kinds of plans were those, if you don't mind going into a little more detail about like the kind of celebration that was planned for the schools last year?
Not at all. We started the year with help from the communications department. Just like before, you know, everyone's so busy at the end of the year before we came, we were so busy at Sanchez because we had this tremendous pressure to pack everything because everything was going to be moved June 1st, right? So we didn't think of any of the planning that needed to happen for the start of the year. And Metz was also packing and moving because they had to make room for us. They had to, the way we were organized in the building and the facilities was that the Metz teachers took one half of that long academic halls and they emptied out the other half for us. So both schools were real busy with closing the schools down for the year, that there was no time to plan for how we were going to start. Communications department came in and I think they put something together for us. It was a we go together, like milk and cookies, like nachos and cheese, and we had a little assembly at the beginning of the year that kind of the whole focus is we go together, and that's why I mentioned earlier that we received a really warm welcome, and it was really nice, right? Um, Between the adults and everything, but once the kids got settled, and we did in the cafeteria try to. It wasn't this half of the cafeteria as Metz and this is Sanchez. We didn't do that. We did have enough sense to plan it. Okay, they're by class, but the classes are separate. This is a Metz class. We do it by grade level as they come into the cafeteria. So then you had kids, not calling each other names or not, sneering at each other about the school that you belong to, that sort of thing. That was at the beginning of the school. I know that's not what you asked for. You asked about end of year. So we had been talking and planning about what are we going to do to bring closure to Metz. And we thought we have 2 years, right? We had last year and this year. We thought of doing an assembly at the end of the first year, right? Because we knew that that the grieving process was going to take a while. Do it at the end of the first year, and then start the next year. We had planned both principles of doing more things integrated to bring the two communities together, right? We had started talking about that, sharing kids between classrooms and all that good stuff. But then we got closed down, and then at the end of this year, there was supposed to be like a grand finale, if you will, another assembly that would have been bigger and better and more to honor the community here that had, come to school here. None of that had happened. It's not going to be possible to do it. I mean, we could do something virtually, but that's again, these virtual things are just not working out.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope I answered your question there.
Yes, thank you.
We had done more of but imagine it was in March of the first year. So we were going to have an assembly just to honor Metz and former alumni. That's what it was going to be at the end of the first year. It wasn't going to be a big formal farewell. The big formal farewell would have happened this year.
Cassie, do you have any more content questions. If not, I have two more that are pretty simple, but
No, I think I'm finished with my section. You can go ahead.
okay. I was just curious on a personal level, if you have any future plans, like what is after for you after this year that Metz is closing?
I hope they'll have me at Sanchez. I think this is a big challenge, being in this position for as long as I have. You need something new, right? So for me, this is a challenge, and I'm always up for a challenge. You know, to get mundane, you know, to be. It is my biggest challenge right now is thinking about, and this interview with, thank you all very much, because it's helping me reflect here. I've kind of like lost, or I've just overlooked the whole end of this year because we had planned on doing something. I don't know how we can do that. I will speak to the communications department. I'm going to need help. It's virtual. I did bring it up when they started planning about the inauguration. So I insisted that that's right. That's why I'm not even thinking of doing anything this year, because I mean, how can we? So we're going to incorporate it into the inauguration of over there at Sanchez. I know my charge is going to be, hopefully will be in person, right? And I want to get to know the parents, the community. I want them to know that I'm, you know, me as a person, as their principal, I'm here to look out for all of the children at Sanchez. It's now I have to really be cognizant of when I speak, because I'm speaking in future terms. All of the children of Sanchez, which is going to be made up of two neighborhood communities. I haven't even started on a whole other facet, but you know, East Austin, if you're not from here, you wouldn't know that, is divided into little neighborhoods, and each neighborhood has its own leaders. And I wouldn't say that Metz and Sanchez were necessarily rivals. And I've learned this as an outsider, but being here for so long, they weren't, you know, the best of friends. So this is a challenge,
Mhm.
it's a big challenge. I am just very, very anxious and ready and willing to work with people, because that's the job I signed up for. Not remotely, you know, in person. I think I can much better on a personal level than remotely, right? And I just want to let everyone know that it's going to be okay.
Mhm.
That we're going to serve all of the students to the best that we can. You know, I think we've managed to do that with the faculty. We've got great teachers from Metz and Sanchez here, and we've all come together. And I think everyone here will agree. Anyone that you asked, that we're doing a great job of working as a single, you know, one faculty. I want that to be the same with the student body and the community.
Well, hopefully it turns into a successful year for both of the communities.
Right. I want to shift the focus from Metz and Sanchez to East Austin. You know, our kids in East Austin deserve this modernized campus. You know, we're one and the same. We're East Austin. You know, let's think of ourselves that way.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think that is it. I think one last question would just be if there's anything else that we didn't discuss. There are a lot of things we didn't discuss, but anything kind of related to what we did touch on, but that you think is worth mentioning.
I'll show myself. There's a thing. One thing that we didn't touch on, because I mean, there's just so many things, is how we brought the kids together. Remember last year it was separate. I didn't go into that. Last year there was more tension as well, because every year it's different in the number of kids there are in each classroom, right? But when it's one campus, oh well, the first grade classes have 13 kids in their classes, and the fourth grade have 22. Oh well, that's a grade level thing that happened this year. So what? You know, you don't really focus on it that much. But what happened last year was unique because we had two separate schools. So we had at one grade level this happened at several grade levels. At any, let's just take one grade level, right? Let's take first grade. The Sanchez classes were overflowing. The ratio, as defined by TEA for students to teachers is one teacher for every 22 students. We were up to 24 and 25 students in the first grade classrooms. And then we have Metz classrooms that were at like 12 and 9. So how do you deal with morale, teacher morale there? And the community kid from Sanchez kids kept enrolling, and they had to go, and Sanchez teachers and the community people from Metz were leaving because they were upset with the whole school closure. That was very difficult to deal with because we couldn't mix the kids because we were running at 2 separate camps. It was tough to keep the morale up. Thank goodness it's over, but that's a whole other hour conversation, right? So that's just a little bit of, of what was happening. It was tough. Last year was very tough. This year was a lot better. Pandemic and all, I think this year was better than last year.
At least they were united.
Right. And because of the pandemic, I don't think I dealt with as much of the grieving or anger that is there. I think it's there. There hasn't been opportunity for me to deal with it because parents aren't allowed in here. We don't have face-to-face. I think it may be waiting for us next year, but that's okay. The silver lining there will be that it's a brand new campus and it is our school, and I'm just going to continue to try to make it positive. Anyways, I hope I answered your questions.
Yes, you did. I'm going
Yeah, that was
to
amazing.
go ahead and stop the recording.